Dude, hit. Aw, you bitch. What the? Whoa. Whoa.
Damn.
Whoa. Whoa. That's a first for me, buddy. What the fuck? Holy shit. My God. Oh my God. That's hilarious. That is a save right there. Disclaimer, mods were used, but mostly just non-gameplay cosmetic ones and a few quality of life stuff like increasing the FPS. But other than that, nothing out of the ordinary that'll break the game or something. Also, some Switch gameplay will be used in the video as well. So, you know, if the drop in quality as far as what the game looks like, you know, that's the explanation. And I honestly don't know how I'd preface this video. It's not a review or a showcase that I usually go about for, but I will say this. Spoilers for those who have yet to play this game all the way through. So I've had a very love and barely any hate relationship to the Sonic series as a whole, and my general experience with it has been more than just a positive one. Growing up with the first game of the series, but since I was just a kid over a friend's house, I never get to fully play it and would just get brushed off to go play Super Mario All-Stars on the SNES, or worse, get the console's RCA cables removed because the older kids wanted to play and let me play until I lost. So I'm pretty sure I could say that they were really impatient to say the least, and I was just being a little too good at the game. Luckily, or just gratefully, I was just glad to be able to play something that wasn't Indie Racing 2000 on my N64, since for the time that was the only game I could say I could own. So really, Mario and Sonic was the best refreshment I could have whenever it came down to going over a friend's house. Besides that, Sonic is the main topic, obviously, and for me, my timeline of events into the series could be as such: Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Spinball, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic 2, Sonic Advance 1, 2, 3 and Battle, Sonic Heroes, Sega Sonic because for some reason Dave & Buster's, me and my mom went to as a kid, had it imported, so I don't know what was up with that. Shadow the Hedgehog if you count that as a Sonic game, Sonic Riders, Sonic Unleashed but the PS2 version, Sonic Rush, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic CD, Sonic Colors, Sonic Rider Zero Gravity, Sonic and the Black Knight, Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2, Lost World for 3DS, Sonic Forces, and now Sonic Frontiers. Yeah, that's a big list, and I feel like I might have left a few out, but if I left them out, it's probably because I only played a few snippets of it, though I will say I have played all the way through Generations on 3DS before the main game. Oh yeah, Generations 3DS. Just gonna slide that in there. Yeah, there you go. The mainline Generations never did it for me like Unleashed did, if I'm being completely honest, but the mods for that game are pretty swell, and I can say that. But I do want to make it known, no, I am by no means a fan. I just enjoy the series, which, yes, the channel profile does have an OC of a glitch, but that's because I really like that design as well as the fan game tied to it for its time, which I know I'm going off the rails from the main topic of the video, but I have to mention that that fan game is still alive and kicking, which is mind-blowing considering the years of silence. But yeah, go check it out for yourself. Also, continue with the origin of the profile. I'm typically ashy because I hate the way lotion feels on my skin. And oh yeah, Ashura's Wrath, and that's the ash in the name as H because the ashiness of my skin, and the TH is the wrath from Ashura's Wrath. So yeah, good origin story to my channel in the naming and choicing for it. Other than all of that, yes, I've had a good history when it comes to the huge amounts of games that have been pumped out from that franchise, and how they just about almost did every game genre under the sun. They just sadly weren't able to get that solid balance that some games have had, as well as their series. Some games think they have it, some just don't even hit the mark that made Sonic, well, Sonic.
Portal is ready.
What happened to Shadow?
Yep, Sonic has short-term memory loss.
Yeah, to say this franchise has had a few hard times is an understatement. And with the many fan outcries for a game to be in their ideal flavor, whether it be full 2D or full 3D, 3D with 2D or 2D with fake 3D, genre of fighting, racing, just a whole lot of etceteras, that it gets pretty understandable why it might be anxiety inducing for the people that work at Sonic Team. And it's also bad enough to hear that former team members probably just wanted to leave, either to avoid the sinking ship, a loss of passion, or even both, really. It's pretty saddening to hear stuff like that from what used to be the Golden Boy mascot from a company that butted heads with a company like Nintendo of all companies. Alas, everything so far has come to this moment, as well as me making this video. So let's talk about Sonic Frontiers marketing. Now, that's a weird topic, and that was a weird time. So we had IG Ignorant showcasing the long-awaited gameplays, supposed leaked rumors, and whatever relevancy 4chan has when it comes to early access, he said, she said kind of biz. The first showing to Frontiers were giving fans literal fan tears. The many speculations that led to the "my family member at Sega" nonsense knows the game's gonna be this and that, and all the worry that was left because of the disappointment and false hope that was Sonic Forces. So just imagine how many fans felt when the same gaming outlet with the same remembered quote stating,
"Find this thing that was never really actually there. Sonic was never good. 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 If you disagree, you can call the cops."
Suffering decades of the supposed, "oh, Sonic has always had a rough transition going into 3D" from the many vocal, well-known YouTubers, and somehow kind of feels similar to my aforementioned multiple fans' expectations and many fan ideas, that it's overwhelming and making people want to jump ship for those involved in the titles, just have that want to escape it all. But in the end, I've always seen both the devs and player feedback sides to be understandable when it came to how vocal, passionate fans can be, as well as the dying passions from devs of old. But with fan games, good, bad, and even controversial, it has that Sonic synergy for what both 2D and 3D enjoyers could want, and the vast amount of game engines and other means to express and showcase what a fan could do, and even at times seems fans would have just been the better option to go with. I mean, look at Sonic. Oh shoot. Yeah, let me just put this between these two. Yes. Perfection. How could I forget that? The definition for mania is a mental illness marked by periods of great excitement or euphoria, delusions and overactivity, or an excessive enthusiasm or desire, an obsession. Yes, the title of Sonic Mania is a perfect match fitting for an official fan game brought to us by fans, for fans. But I'd say it's about time for a new 3D game that touches on new grounds, or a new frontier, if you will. And with all of this prefacing out of the way, it's time to talk about this global playtest. 5 years was all the time needed for Sonic Team to rethink the formula of how a 3D Sonic game should be. Pulling info from Wikipedia, the most reliable source I know, but to sum up the history in that time frame, the planning period of Frontiers, as we've heard probably time and time again, was to rethink how a 3D Sonic game should be. And apparently something that could carry over for another 10 years. Phew. That's a bold way of going about things. Very questionable indeed. Not only that, but actually reflecting on the feedback of forces, and even thinking the Unleashed style of game design isn't what fans want anymore. Okay, wait. Okay, if this is true, then is this what they've been calling the past few game releases? Because they definitely don't really live up to the Unleashed standard of things. Well, maybe Generation, but sure, it was linear, but it managed to feel enjoyable. Colors was, frankly, the way that game kind of went as far as a booth game should have been how Sonic Unleashed handled. But I don't think the Unleashed design wasn't really used that much besides Unleashed and Generations. Continuing on, but as time progressed, they started to brainstorm about Sonic Adventure, Super Mario Bros. 3, and how those games went about level by levels and the use of a map to get to said level. We definitely got that in how cyberspace levels were worked out. It's also mentioned how a particular sickness did impact the methods that they would use to bring about ideas for the game to be frontiers. And it makes me wonder how they turn out if someone decided to not eat a bat's head off or something. Heck, even at a certain point, they said, fuck this shit, and started all over from scratch. So I guess that first build really must have been something bad. I can see that being a thing though. I do wonder what they had before then, you know, for curiosity. And considering how safe this game actually is, like, I really do hope we get some sort of footage of it, just so we can at least have a grasp of what they were kind of going with. But when it came to designing the game as a whole and grabbing inspirations, though Sonic games haven't fully went with a Sonic-focused pure combat and speed kind of game, besides the difference being night and day, taking inspiration from Breath of the Wild, like many other open world games have done due to that game's usage of freedom and wanting to give players that same sense of freedom. They would apparently test level designs of the past like Adventure and base the speed Sonic can go to how big they should make the open zone. Still don't know why they called it that, but to also make it so that the world isn't just empty, they knew to add in the good old pop-in objects that'll reward players to explore, whether it be puzzle solving activities, fighting a certain particular type of enemy, going through sequences, and many other challenges to get collectibles that'll be needed to progress, while also letting players know that they are free to do what they want and not one way is mandatory. And really they succeeded on that aspect, although in a few areas it does feel a little lackluster, to say the least. Chaos 2D Island fucking sucks. Sorry about that. Got a little too blasted away. So I've had a fair share of playing this game, 100%ed the game, played it again, but only doing what is needed on the second go. You can check the gameplay out on the channel in the live tab, but I think I deserve the right to say this game as a game is a good 8 out of 10. But best believe if the DLC roadmap wasn't a thing and the playtest quote wasn't said, I genuinely would make this game like a 69 out of 10, but more on the 6 out of 10 aspect. And not just because the 69 XD lol, but to understand why I think the game is 2 points up from that original score for those two different factors. And I'll discuss this more later into the video. And as I talk about the video, you'll probably understand my reasoning why I gave it a 2 score up versus keeping it at the same base score of my initial thinking. So for the story of the game, it definitely does not start with this scene, but instead a short comic that's a really quick read. Just like in Forces, they expect people to get their fill from medias outside of the actual game themselves, but at least this time around, it's a much shorter comic compared to the lore-filling context Forces seriously needed in the game itself. I'll say this, if you think this is okay, fine, so be it, but you must understand that as far as gaming is concerned, the game story should be told within the game itself if you want players to fully understand it, especially considering how cinematic games have become over the years anyways and the success of breaking the video game movie curse. I just don't see the reason why Sega couldn't have just put this prequel comic into an animated cutscene. I can't be the only one that would have loved to have seen Sonic and his friends, especially his friends, do what they are capable of doing, but it's a thing, and I hope continuing on they just put more effort into bringing the comics to the actual games and moving picture mode, of course. I don't know why they were able to animate the Knuckles prequel to the story on YouTube, but couldn't do that with the comic. It just makes this whole ordeal even more confusing. But then again, Sega's marketing was just as crazy as explaining to normal people how deep this franchise lore can be, regardless of the use of an anthropomorphic animal from Japan, so go figure. As far as the story goes, it's a real laid-back one and incredibly safe, and at times when I compare how safe they went with this and let's say how unsafe Sonic 2006 as a reboot was, it makes you wonder how that timeline of events would have played out if both games having that open zone gameplay choice. I think that type of timeline would have led more success for Sonic Team if they just took their time, played it safe. But alas, it never happened, but maybe that's for the best. Each game has a really good aspect for its lore, gameplay, mechanics, characters, and a lot of world building, even if it has been a rocky road to get to where we are now. Safe story aside, they got Ian Flynn to be the director of how this game's tale plays out. Yep, references. Lots and lots of references. I really don't know the dude, but apparently he likes to make a lot of references. And look, by no means am I against it, but one, I have no idea what work he's put out outside of this game, other than people saying he's really good at storytelling and working with the comics while also connecting the game's lore within said comics. And two, I don't feel like Sega fully allowed him to put his story vision into play the same way Sonic Mania was able to fully restore many people's love and nostalgia for the classic 2D games that Sega themselves failed to do with Sonic 4. And most scenes of the games end up as such. Character talks, finishes their statement, maybe move around a bit, then the other character talks, then it ends, and frankly they could have just been T-posing the whole entire time and it will remain the same kind of cutscene with context. But that's more for the optional interactions. As for what the story mandatory stuff does, it's okay. It really shines better in the pre-rendered cutscenes for the most part, but it's alright. Just alright. But overall, the whole big picture story of Frontiers is Eggman sends a fake Eggman to do some bad deeds to Sonic and his friends while he's investigating some ancient tech while using his new AI companion to learn about some cyberspace pillar, and then ultimately gets warped inside of it. Meanwhile, Sonic, Tails, and Amy head toward the Starfall Islands they believe Eggman to be located at, until a portal comes about and vacuums them up into cyberspace. Then from there, we take control of Sonic for the rest of the game, and because it's Sonic, he manages his way out while Amy, Tails, and Knuckles are stuck in pods. Oh yeah, did I mention Knuckles was here? Yeah, that YouTube video I mentioned earlier had Knuckles roaming around Sky Sanctuary as he monologues about being the last of his people, and upon him discovering a new unseen area, he ultimately finds himself being teleported to a sandy area, fending off against a few attackers with pretty good ease before his vision ultimately gets glitched out and bam, he's in a pod. I do gotta say, Knuckles' voice actor's performance in this was goddamn good and even nostalgic feeling. Imagine that. Knuckles, when he's not made out to be a big idiot, feels new yet familiar, but in the end he too gets entrapped into a cyberspace orb. Moving back to Sonic, as he, in good video game awakening fashion, hears a disembodied voice from the sky vaguely explaining his situation, and yeah, then you're just thrown into the game, out for the controls and gameplay. For the first time since I believe 06, you get a full range camera control while you play the game using the right analog stick. I just love that the game forces players to look around first as a means to indirectly tell players, yes, you can move both analog sticks in this game. You're going to have to do that when you're going about traversing, or at least the open world sections. But at the same time as what the player's first taste of gameplay was, being that of the usual linear hallway Sonic Dash-like corridor level designs known as Cyberspace. A lot of people that got to play the demos before release critiqued these as feeling weird and even restrictive, but the open world as having a much better feeling and freeing controls than the linear levels. And man, after playing this game twice, I can't agree more.
Hey, John, big pee-pee.
But for me, a lot of the cyber levels have both several hits and misses to them that vary more than just the overly tight controls and level layouts. But before continuing about cyberspace, I want to talk about the new gameplay frontier Sonic Team went with, the open zone. Yeah, I'm not calling it that. It's indeed an open world, or maybe not even that, considering the world itself lacks what most, if not all, people would consider an open world. So here's my philosophy. When people usually consider stuff to be an open world games, and before the creation of Breath of the Wild, most people would grab inspiration from the Grand Theft Auto series, specifically the original trilogy. Not that one, but this one. Granted, when it came down to GTA 3 and even Vice City, there were a lot that was lacking as far as what we now expect out of a modern open world game. The basic controls were good enough, but with no camera controls and only that unmovable first person type of mode that I still to this day don't understand why they couldn't just better utilize a basic aiming system, especially with the dual analog controls being mandatory to play and beat the game. And yes, I know you can move with the directional buttons, but in GTA 3, you literally could not progress the game unless you had the ability to honk the horn, which was tied to the L3 button, which was also connected to the left analog stick. So yes, you indeed needed that control feature. And as for Vice City, I'm not sure, but regardless, the point still stands, and we've more than progressed past that. But for the most part, whenever I hear open world, I think of something like a world that you could simulate reality to a degree, and that same world acts as a projection of total freedom within the legal everyday citizen to the most insane criminal mastermind that whacks people around with a giant dildo.
That one was for you, Johnny.
And even if some things might not be the most realistic when executed, the game still remains to simulate a livable, breathing world that, if it came down to it, you as a human could live here, whether you are rich or poverty stricken. It would be a possibility. It is basically a world in which you could live in. But Sonic Frontiers isn't any of this. Not in the slightest, but that's okay, because to me, Sonic Frontiers isn't an open world, a sandbox, and not even an open zone. I see Frontiers as just a free-roaming Sonic game, a game made toward player freedom to just roam around with no restriction like timers or any sense of urgencies, but just not open enough for anyone to consider it to be a livable, thriving new world for mankind, or even the Sonic cast to start a new life in as it is now. This is how I see this island by island design the devs went with. It was what made me understand what the game was going for. Even if the object pop-in is still a bit of an annoyance on the immersive side at times, here's where the world you're in both succeeds but fails at a little. So during development, as stated earlier, they wanted to remove said linearity that has plagued Sonic games for the past decade, which for the first two islands, they do just that well and maintain a balance of when the game holds your hand and when it just lets you have the same fun Magic Sonic has to his Sonic X days of exploring and running up and down hills and finding that one spot of a flower garden in a rocky mountain area. But where it fails is good old Chaos Island. You see, in the first island, Chronos, it had that good start to it, the tutorial section being locked off, but had enough to strike players' curiosity to collect a few items before opening gateways, while also getting new players to know the basics of modern Sonic, even though his homing attack in this has been nerfed to hell. But all of that becomes meaningless the moment you encounter the childbearing hip ninja. Besides what the internet probably did with that fact on Rule 34 websites, the game lets you know that homing attack is just a start while showing off the enemies you're going to be fighting, as well as what they do, how to fight against them, the items they drop once they are defeated that you need to collect, and what they are used for, the skill tree that you'll utilize to unlock new stuff that you can do when it comes down to the same combat, as well as introducing a new silo usage, which did come out the blue. They didn't really explain that at all. They just threw it into the game and said, hey, go have at it. But, you know, using that for puzzle solving, as well as the usage of freedom of traversal to solve said puzzles, for modern Sonic standards, it's a lot. Especially since for now, it's a playable Sonic only game. Yeah, that roadmap got me a little anxious again, but in a curious, good way. I know this is random, but I wanted to also insert this. Remember when people thought Lost World was weird for giving Sonic a run button? Yeah, well, to those that are enjoying this game, just know that this game has a literal run button. I mean, as far as boost standards go, boosting was always a matter of mowing your enemy down, but not here. And to be honest, Sonic having a run button always made sense to me, considering the whole series was based off of a balance of platforming, speed, and managing the two at appropriate times, and an extra speed option besides blindly rolling or boosting to win adds in that high risk stakes feeling to it. You know, like for super players or something. Now all we need is a crouch button to spin dash without having to drop dash about. But then when it came to going to the second island, Ares still maintains that freedom that Chronos had, and then some, with its many opportunities to gain height from either platforms, mini aerial grinding rails, or a small pebble that yeets you high into the sky at random times when you're running about. I also find the fact that the Chronos Guardian mini bosses and the main boss titan Giganto in the first island is more grounded, just like the general free roaming you'll be doing over there. Then when you get to the second island, most enemies, any bosses, and even the main boss are all aerial based, besides, Sumo and the Shark Guardian, which complements how often you'll grind on rails and jump up high in order to get that good sweet air momentum.
You need to leave!
Momentum. The quantity of motion of a moving body measured as a product of its mass and velocity, or the impetus gained by a moving object. You know what? Now that I said the forbidden M word, I guess I should talk about that and give my say on it. So momentum. It doesn't really exist in this game outside of jumping off of rails. Now, if modders come in, prove me wrong with hex values deep within the game's code, fine. Cool. I just don't see the same Sonic Adventure, hell, not even the classic Sonic 2 momentum buildup that I'd assume was the reason for why Chemical Plant Zone had endless long loops. Looking back on the Nintendo versus Sega wars, it's Sega flexing that blast processing with speed so fast you wouldn't even be able to see the character you're meant to be controlling. Is that really what momentum haters were afraid of? I don't know. For its time, it was an achievement for both gaming, hardware, and overall just breaking a few limits in the process while letting all the cool kids at the playground around the time know that Sega had high-speed action under their belt. So my question is, why was it now looked up as a tired trope or something to be denied when it's been there since the original 2D and best true 3D games? It just didn't make sense to me on why people felt like that was such a controversial topic to bring up. The definition of supersonic speed is the speed of an object that exceeds the speed of sound. For objects traveling in dry air of a temperature of 20 degrees Celsius at sea level, this speed is approximately 343.2 milliseconds. Speeds greater than 5 times the speed of sound are often referred to as hypersonic. The last 2D game with the M word was Mania, not counting Origins since that's literally just a collection of already released decade-old games, and the last 3D game with the M word, well, going back, that's kind of a head scratcher. And the reason for that is, for one, obviously we can't really consider any of the Boost games as having it besides grinding, and two, I'm pretty sure people will be there to disagree with me, but before that, I have this question to you, the viewer. Is it momentum or scripted inertia for the Boost games? Now, I know what you could probably be thinking if you believe them to have the M word. An example I feel that could be used is something like the moments when you're going downhill, stopping, letting the controller go, and standing still to watch Sonic start moving down on his own. And while you might think you were onto something, but that not only does not count, but even the way most of those work are indeed just scripted or have an angle that makes him go down based on how steep the slope is, as if the moment his shoes hit a certain angle degree, he will just turn around and go down. Meanwhile, in reality, there would be nothing to stop the average person from going up that same slope, and anything beyond that would just be called falling. But as for the last 3D Sonic game to have the M word, it was... I know. Not only am I dragging the N-word section of the video, but I'm going further away from the game topic. Not really, but I just wanted to say that I just need to fully give people the understanding of how this works and what defines it for the series. And this 2005 game is truly the last and has and is a good example of the N-word and how Sonic Frontiers goes about not having it. But to wrap it up, because it's really a short explanation. In Shadow the Hedgehog, going downhill increases speed naturally and understandably, while going uphill is a slow trek upwards, as physics fully intended. As far as momentum goes, let me show you how Frontiers works but in Shadow's game. But before that, I have to also mention acceleration. You see, in Shadow's game, if you manage to maintain a good steady path going straight ahead in unscripted territory pass of the game, you'll notice that the speed increases and can be increased to a ridiculous amount. I just don't know if the game has the top speed, which means the maximum speed Shadman can go as the game's limiter, so it's a bit tricky from my non-gamer coding mind. But to continue on with my Frontiers example, Sonic when casually strolling, he has a, let's say, running top speed of 20. And this speed remains 20 even when going uphill, according to the speedometer. But let's say if I gave the game a little benefit, considering when you go downhill, it goes up to about 25, but only downhill. But no, this means nothing. I'd even say the speedometer is even lying to you, or maybe something of a gimmick of some sorts. And really this part is hard to explain since even the game itself doesn't seem to know when the speedometer should move or not. I mean, look at this. Sonic's moving forward, but backwards at like 2 speeds. But get this, you can make Sonic move in place, and guess what? He still moves at 2 speed. So with the speedometer being completely invalid, you can see how the M-word is non-existent and the speedometer is just meant to be.
My God, that's amazing! You are so
fast.
Huh? Wait a second. Something's not right here. You were just making it look like you were
fast.
You're a phony! Hey, this guy's
a gimmick. And as for Shadman's Frontiers comparison into the top speed simulation, remember how Shadow going uphill is slow as hell but possible enough to go uphill? So this is what Frontiers basically does. You can definitely see how, they kind of work the same. Besides the fact that clearly Shadow's going slower and Sonic moving faster, they work just the same as far as top speeds go. But this, my probably bored viewer, is strafing. Shadow strafing has, let's say, a top speed to speed of 20, just to prove on the point of how the M-word works for the last time. So this is Shadow's game with momentum. And this is how Sonic Frontiers handles mobility. But one last thing to end off this section to showcase Frontiers again. Drop dashing has a certain speed. It's like the fast start, mid, and slow end. If a player drop dashes uphill, does a 180 degree down arrow key turnaround tap, then drop dash down that same hill, you would typically end up about 99% of the same area you just were at when you first did your first drop dash uphill. Maybe a little further since the minor extra 5 speed plus going down the hill. And if you think of something of this sort because you think I left it out, no, Sonic sliding downhill isn't momentum either. It's the scripted inertia. Otherwise he gains speed, right? Hell, most of the times he's not even touching the actual ground. So that's even a bigger subject of a topic dealing with collision. But yeah, now that's it for the momentum debacle. And in all fairness, it's actually okay. It wasn't really in the game, and even with PC mods we have currently that can add it, apparently make the game unplayable at certain points, which is what I find as unfortunate, even with the game having a sprint button. But as I've said before, the game itself is pretty safe in execution. But if I'm wrong about the whole Shadow the Hedgehog momentum and top speed, acceleration, all that stuff, then that's just means either Heroes or Adventure 2 was the last 3D Sonic game to have it, but my example explaining why Frontiers doesn't have momentum still stands. But now let's talk about Chaos.
No, not Shadow Fever! Death to all who oppose.
No. The island. Phew. Chaos Island being the semi-last out of the two, and not counting the actual last two areas, considering they're just pieces of Kronos Island, Chaos Island will feel like a big slap to the face to the players, because almost every bumper, every dash pad, and even some parts of the freely platforming terrain just locks you into a 2D mode, and I really can't stand it. If I'm being completely honest, it's disgusting how often you'll find yourself in a 2D state when you just want to freely roam around. Some were fine, but it just came across as not only lazy, but babying the players themselves. What, you need a hand getting up to the top of this floating mass of land because dual analog sticks too hard to control? And yes, I get it. This and that segment wasn't designed for 3D, but why not? And for the biome design of Chaos Island isn't completely free by any means either. The same ash-colored, gray, white, and dark atmosphere, and even the fact that like the sky is more clear during the night, but the moment it turns daytime, it's like Pollution City. Like, I'm so confused by that. Like, you think you'll get a good snapshot of the sun rising, and then clouds just overcome that. It felt wasted as a volcanic biome and definitely felt more empty out of the two other islands. I made a Sonic GT video sometime last year. I had hoped that we would get a form of hilltop zone in 3D since it felt fleshed out in that game. And not only that, but Sonic Simulator did that 2D to 3D level just as good as GT did, where GT had the ability to run all the way to the top of the hills to see the lava inside of it, and Sonic Simulator had minecart rails that led into a cave with lava players could enter inside of. I get these are pretty much fan games, but one has ads for the Sonic movie, Origins and Frontiers, and whatever else comes in the future, so I don't see that as an excuse. And yeah, they wanted a more realistic biome setting, but to see an underground lava cave to explore would have been way cool as a spelunking and more expansive means of roaming around. And the same goes for these first two islands. It was great to be able to go underwater and not instantly die once again in 3D, but the concept art feels completely wasted with what we got in the final product in the end. But nah, we get freaking Pinball, which, to make a note on that kind of gameplay changes, Pinball, Toho Galaga for the whole computer hacking event, and matching the tombstone puzzles on Kronos Island before facing Giganto. It makes me honestly feel like Sega must have seen the whole Ouija Plays Kotaku article about him beating the Sonic Forces refund speedrun and created these time-consuming events just to make sure that no one could do it again. Also, hashtag Ouija Plays did nothing wrong. He was right to make the move. But yeah, just to be on the safe side, I doubt that Sonic Team did this because of that, but I guess to break the repetitiveness that was Freedom or hallway levels, which I'm fine with, but they should have gave these new activities a mode of some sort, like the arcade mode you get once you finish the game, but maybe the updates in the future will add it in and hopefully flesh those out so it's not just the same thing. They have different levels to those. It'd be nice to see it. If you're gonna have it in the game, I mean, may as well flesh it out while you can and make it feel more unique. Generic. Characteristics of or relating to a class or group of things. That definition out of the way, that's exactly how I feel about the music, and to me, most seem pretty bad. But as far as generic goes, it definitely has a lack of variety for the most part. It consists of a lot of one thing that doesn't fit, and you'll hear a lot of it. Meanwhile, the other that creates hype matches the mood, and it just fits and isn't misplaced. Now, I know I just said something that seems like blasphemy for a Sonic game, but let me add some clarity. I said the music is pretty bad and misplaced, but the vocal tracks you and everyone loves,
Gotcha, my darling Sonic.
Amy, what are you doing here?
Sonic, this time there's no way out of me.
Oh fuck yeah, those fuckers slap. They absolutely slap. They are some A-tier fucking bangers. So the actual music tracks themselves and the free roaming is just what I expected and has a balance of what should be in the game. Roaming around is chill and calming as it should be until you decide to fight a mini boss or something that rightfully so deserves its own music tracks. Which to me, those tracks were fine. They did match the mood, but for the cyberspace music tracks, they just missed the mark. Or at least 80% of them are misses to me. Like, they're good music tracks, they just don't fit and they're just misplaced. So when the gameplay first showcased, I think a lot of people confused the fact that they hated that IGN was showing it off and somehow thought things like Sonic is boring here, Unity engine do not steal in my favorite. Ill piano music? Sonic games have never needed this, never used it. Why can't we have classic Sonic in a classic cartoony world with classic Sonic music? Or some things of that degree. And frankly, as far as the pianos go, whoops, wrong game.
Yo, Daniel, thank you. What? Who made this song? Damn! Yo, this is the best song I've heard on the soundtrack so far. Turn that shit up! Turn that shit up, boy! Woo! And the level is, yo, this is a level like a snowy level based in like some beautiful traditional land from Japan? Sakura blossoms? This is a weeaboo.
The thing is, nothing was ever wrong with Sonic games music, but as far as my experience goes, I went back to replay all of Forces, and even that game managed to have a lot of non-vocal bangers, but both Frontiers and Forces had this kind of music set. Music that's instrumental, instruments with a few little vocal choir segments, and then full-blown vocal tracks. I also gotta say, it might have started with Forces, but what's up with the usage of basic dance club, dubstep, techno music? I mean, Forces did it right for most of its levels, not counting classic Sonic's ear-bleeding, medi-sounding levels, but for the most part, Forces was only guilty of having music tracks that seemed like they fit the game, just not the specific levels themselves. But overall, it somehow comes to a point that it kind of like matches. Kind of weird, but overall, Forces is forced. And not only that, but the levels being so short-lived, you couldn't even enjoy the full music tracks themselves. And Frontiers having that same issue, Cyberspace has the same musical issues, but a little more. Luckily though, the semi-vocal choir segmented tracks for both games gave me enough enjoyment to just blindly ignore whatever levels they were a part of, but more for Forces than Frontiers because, well, let's be honest. If we're going to talk about level variety out of both of these games, Forces knocks Frontiers out of the park on this. And we all know this is true. Basic hallway 2D levels be damned. Forces was based off of the OC Do Not Steal gimmick. Meanwhile, Frontiers, well, Green Hills. Oh, wait, no. This is Sunset Hills, isn't it? Same thing. Those two, Chemical Plant Zone, Sky Sanctuary, and Empire City, I'm guessing. Yeah, as bad as Forces can be bashed to the dirt, it was at least unique when it came down to its level design. But really, the music in Frontiers didn't do it for me. And I'd more often question the music, asking, who thought generic dance music number 13 was a fit for this level? Yeah, sure, it's a banger, but again, I want to clarify, the music ain't bad, but maybe a few different instruments would have been better. And I understand that technically these aren't the actual levels and are Sonic's broken up memories of how he sees past levels or something. But even if that was the case, then either the music track should have been the same for the same variety of levels, or better yet, have more cyberspace variety of past levels and then create some lame motif versions of those past levels. Generations did this no problem. Frontiers even did it, though very hardly noticeable. Really hard to notice. And you can bet your ass Mania did what that game did with what T. Lopes blessed players' ears with.
Yo, T is remixed. That nigga is an artist. He's a chef. T. Lopez is cooking these tracks. Oh! Ah, let's go. Let's go get him, T. T, get him. God damn. He murdered this one.
Playing it safe or not, this is what many would consider the always good in any Sonic game, and to have the music for these levels lack is really weird. It was really jarring for me. Yes, it's cyberspace, cybernetic. Sure, the techno fits, but Sonic music always managed to fit levels with the music to create a kind of harmony. It wouldn't just be one genre of music, it would vary. But as I said before, like, we only have like 5 level types. Maybe if they kind of like went full blown with how cyberspace could be, similar to how Infinite was able to transform levels on the fly, I think it could have worked. I mean, it's bad enough the backgrounds from all cyberspace levels is just lines, rails, floating in the sky, and platforms that you cannot get to, and it's just object placement for the sake of looking vast when it's really not. But that's just one of the things about the music that makes me realize that these cyberspace levels are just really bland and could have done a lot more work into it by not having just regurgitated levels of past games, aka 2D games, and just one 3D era game or 3D era based game. Last thing I want to add for the music that was a big talking point about the game's early showing was free roaming and everyone's hot takes about the piano music. I actually made a video about all of Sonic Frontier's positives when it came down to its early showings, and made a Zelda edit if Breath of the Wild went about with this same recurring overworld theme instead of its subtle piano every so often, and it goes a little something like this. Regardless of how big and spread out cyberspace levels were from each other, hearing Green Hill Zone music would eventually get annoying, especially since we're already tired of that level showing up for however many times now. But I'll end this segment off prematurely because I want to talk about the vocal tracks around the end, since it makes sense for me and the spoilers for when that happens and feels like it's a good ending point for the video. So how about them new next-gen graphics?
What is that?
Bruh.
Nah, I'm just joking. I'm not gonna rip the game on that. And frankly, I can't really think of what should be said for them, so I won't beat around the bush. I do want to go over the overall world and level design, the choices made, and along with the heavy reactions the internet had, or at least the many YouTubers' reactions, that is. Now, by no means has Sonic Games ever really tried to push for cutting-edge graphical fidelity as a means to showcase how good the games look, and yes, Unleashed looks amazing, and same goes for Generations, and I even throw Forces in there, but let's be honest, when has Sega or any Sonic games ever been just about the graphics, or try to make it out to be just about the graphics? I can't ever really recall. Yeah, Hedgehog Engine 1 looks way better than Hedgehog Engine 2, or whatever the hell that debacle is all about. Basically, Sonic Unleashed definitely looks the best out of all the games. Cool, but that's not all it was meant for. It definitely felt like a racing game, but you're a blue hedgehog. Now, with the crazy marketing scheme Sega went with in this game and the first showcase, it seemed like everyone and their mother bashed the game, and yeah, I'd say I had my fair share of takes when we were first getting footage, but eventually that died down, and all we could do was wait, think, analyze, and speculate. So when I say YouTubers, I do want to tie them in to their followers' opinions as a whole, considering the whole, my favorite YouTuber thinks this, so I'll see their point of view and agree with them. So as to not point fingers, I'll consider them as a general audience, and that general amounts of people, most specifically casual outsiders, would agree that this world was quoted to be too realistic, and something along the lines of, why does the world lack color? Why does the world look so depressing? Why does this look like a stolen Unity map? And the whole, why does a cartoony hedgehog that talks look out of place here? Something to that degrees, and then some. My only gripe about all of this was the fact that Sonic has always had this kind of world and vibe to it. Some as colorful and connects to both the Mobius world as well as a human living world, and some that had a darker tone with both the Mobius and human world. Sonic as a series has a lot of vice versa when it comes to a lot of things. I just don't understand anyone having this issue, especially when we had two successful movies that match the realistic and fictional backgrounds the series has for the games, which it takes full inspiration from. But oh no, the movies have a reason, so that was fine. Totally not like Sonic Adventure, Sonic X, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, or even Unleashed. Yeah, it's like they don't exist. And just a lot of other fleshed out lore explained games. Even the damn pre-rendered cutscenes in most games look so damn good, but no one bats an eye when those get praised for its looks. But I'm getting sidetracked. The game looks fine. The islands you run through are fine. Needs work before a start? It's fine. If you need clarity in understanding how Sonic games have worked in the past, well, in the classic games, time would pass from multiple days and multiple nights. Green nature to polluted man-made industrial zones, which was more of a stop the pollution type of backstory. You know, they were doing the whole global warming thing before global warming became a whole trend to follow. While games that have had some kind of peace times didn't start in another Green Hill to industrial areas, and games like Adventure 1, 2 broke up that formula by having just a realistic living world, but unrealistic paths that just to keep the series soul intact, like, you know, spinning loops. So no, Sonic does not need to just be all cartoony. Hell, if you really look back into the games, especially like Sonic CD, go to any future timeline and I promise you it's all real. It's just because it's all bright and colorful doesn't mean that there's not pollution in the background. But continuing on to the cyberspace levels though, I'd say they have an inconsistency in their quality. Besides the fact that they consist of the levels I've already mentioned and showed off how the music does make it feel like it's a factor for said quality inconsistency. But for what most of them are, they are just okay. They are a just okay fit, but mainly for the ones that manage to have a length of over 1 minute, not only lasting more than a minute, but are not just fully 2D. The 2D levels themselves really show the worst differences from the islands to cyberspace, and sure, you get nerfed to hell from your free roaming upgrades regardless of the level being 2D or 3D, but at least for the 3D levels it maintains that freedom of choice and paths that can be taken. And really the only 3D level that I'd say is the worst was the drifting dash pad ones, because at least when it came to Sonic Colors drifting sections, they weren't obvious indicators and instead was a matter of passing a certain invisible line threshold, then you get to drift. But Frontiers has been placed in areas that at first glance I failed to notice, but instead of doing what Colors did, they retextured dash pads green to camouflage it with the Green Hills grass and called it a day. But not only that, but using them is a slippery, buggy mess. And if anything, the ring placement encourages you to light dash instead. You also get a better time, both literally and metaphorically, if you just don't interact with the pads. Not only that, but that level would definitely showcase why camera control could have been a way better feeling for the game when it comes down to cyberspace levels, and how you can literally manipulate your movements along with their cameras to like get better times. Hell, look at speedrunners doing this level. It's like they just dash to the right and then bam, they get a better time than you could ever think. That's all I can really say about the cyberspace levels, to be honest. I already covered the audio for it, and the looks of them ain't much to really talk about since it's literally just 5 levels, and frankly the experience for it's just negative, except for like 3D ones. I don't mind them both from the story and in-game replayability factor, and I do like the fact that 1-2 exists because that's definitely going to be the most played level. I just can't help but think Forces did a way better job in both 2D and 3D. And what's crazy is how much that game was scripted, so I guess for the price of freedom, you get a few jankiness, but then again, it's just a small start to something new. Now for the islands, the 3 biomes of greenery grass, sandy desert, and ashy ice. That is all we got. And I wish we kind of got more instead of just those 3. The first area, Chronos, having Amy felt poetic in a way, and her goal of helping the Coco reunite with their families was a little meh, but true to the type of character she is and the love and care she has for others' well-being, especially Sonic, remains timeless. Though I do feel that one impatient Sonic cutscene felt way out of character for him, even considering the standards they had for him for the past 10 years. It was just as weird as hearing Sonic suddenly hit puberty, because in this game his voice gets pretty deep at times. So I'm guessing they're using that as a mean to like make it more serious, I guess. I don't know. I get he's worried about his friends and all, but that attitude he had just isn't something that at least the game iterations haven't done, or just doesn't feel right. Like, it even got to the point that Amy has to lash out at him, which really kind of rubbed my childhood the wrong way. But when it came down to Amy's self-improvement story, which each Sonic character goes through, it feels a little all over the place. I get what they were going with, which my guess is to spread love to the world instead of being all clingy to one person, but if that was the case, then, well, she never really was that in this game when compared to past games like CD, the adventure games, especially Heroes, and last time I think she was that hopeless romantic character was in Unleashed, although in that game he seemed pretty upset when it came down to how she viewed him, considering he was in his werehog state, and it felt like in that game it almost had that solid grounding between both characters and how they felt toward each other, like a mutual kind of understandings. Maybe because most cutscenes in Frontiers are static, so it never really came across as her being the clingy type, that it was kind of hard to tell. But in the end, the literal heart-to-heart moments the two shared with each other felt really good to see, and they had a calm, warm feeling akin to a few of the Sonic X episodes that had those two as a focus of sorts. It really makes what they witness about the Cocos and the Ancients' backstory feel even more tragic. I guess for the slight distaste for an impatient Sonic I had, this scene was what caused him to understand that yes, his friends need him, but there's something bigger here that's going on that he needs to figure out. And since he is the only one that's not trapped in cyberspace and can go in and out of cyberspace, he has to be the one to do it. And that is the good Sonic fashion that we all know. As for Knuckles being on Ares Island, he definitely had a proper 180 turnaround from his Force's characterization, being a war general and all, from teaching the Cocos to learn to never leave a fallen comrade like a proper leader, from somehow managing to block a blast from Sage aimed towards Sonic. I don't know how that was really possible, and basically having an existential crisis from knowing he's the last of his kind and reflecting on how his duty to protect the Master Emerald is a lonely one. Man. And people say this series doesn't need to be deep. Messaging from his character arc, I guess you could say, is a respectable one and more of an actual leading type, and without the need of saying how none of this is good, that's why it's called war. But I still find that one flashback to Sonic 3 to be not necessarily bad or unnecessary, but it feels like a more interior area, like the Super Emerald's chamber, considering he was looking at an interior after all and not outdoors with vegetation, especially with vegetation being in the desert. Just a slight nitpick, I think it fit better overall. His development was great in my opinion, in the bro to bro moments with Sonic, telling him he may be the last, but he's never alone, and that he has friends with him. Yeah, I felt a tear when he said that. But I will say they did overuse the whole headbutting at times. Oh, I know the Sonic X Knuckles shippers were having a field day on that.
Gay!
But it truly felt good to see Knuckles be more than just a knucklehead again, and I hope this stays. And with his arc's purpose of being to go out there and see the world, I really hope he can, and considering he's been a loved character, a beloved rival since his very first outing, I could see him having an origin spin-off game with his comeuppance and trying to figure out more on the Ancients, the Chaos, his tribes, to call the Emeralds, the Master Emerald, and the remains of the civilizations that could probably make for a good spelunking type game, or something like a Metroidvania, if you will. I mean, whether it be 3D, 2D, I'm pretty sure they can make it work. It's just my thought, you know, Knuckles can punch, kick, and do all the same stuff Sonic does in this game, so why not? Now for Tails. This one annoys me and probably 90% of people that's been around since the second Sonic game. But I guess him being on Chaos Island makes sense with his decade of character bastardization and the actual island not knowing whether it wants to be 2D or 3D. Unless the 2D is a Sonic 2 reference because of the fact that that was his first game appearance. So Tails has been beat down as a person, as a character, and his character, as many have said before, has had his own spin-off games, fought against the likes of Chaos on multiple occasions, a god of destruction, managed to counter Eggman's plans for terrorism and stop his schemes, saving many who cheered his name, and even almost came to the point of offing Eggman for vengeance against one of his best friends that he thought was blown up because of Eggman. Yeah, Tails has been through some shit as a kid. Speaking of being a kid, I think the nature of making him that same Sonic help me tired trope was supposed to be some kind of nod to the fact that Tails may be smart, but he's indeed still just a kid. But really, who's gonna buy that? Moreover, what I feel they wanted to go with Tails was what many known him to be from the past, as someone who could fly high on his own and always believe in himself. So really, a lot of his dialogue comes across as forced, and with the amount of references this game pulled out of the Sonic Historia, just to make it clear that these characters are not gonna be the same way they've been for the past decade. But really, we didn't need so many confirmations like canonical explaining events to tie in just to end up making Tails himself have a hissy fit towards Sonic, when in truth, y'all know who his frustration should be aimed towards. But regardless, if they do conclude this weird, goofy character arc for the Sonic cast as a whole for the series continuation, I think we'd all be in agreement of relief and a proper interest for what Sonic Team does next. Now for Big. I know he didn't have a big role in the game, There's not much to say besides him letting you fish for rewards. If free roaming for upgrades feels too overwhelming for some reason, tedious, definitely so, or if just like me, you just wanted to get them maxed out and out of the way, he's there for you. But as for him being here, I know his involvement to the story is absolute zero besides collecting Eggman memos, which are completely optional. If I was to have my shot at explaining how he actually got here, it would be like this. Froggy, being the plot for Big's motivation, would run off into Mystic Ruins Forest, somewhere in a deep unexplored cave, run into a glowing cyberspace gear next to a cyberspace pillar, swallow it just like he did with the Chaos Emeralds, and head towards the conveniently lit pillar that also catches Froggy's attention. And at the moment as Froggy hears Big, and being the bastard he is, jumps towards the said pillar and is halfway sucked in as Big jumps into action with just enough time to make it through the warp, and maybe even have it so that, you know, he uses his iconic fishing line and he's overwhelmed by the suction of the portal, thus getting stuck inside of the fishing spot we see him while trying to fish Froggy out of the pond, which would also explain why Froggy isn't anywhere here when Sonic arrives, unless...
Yum! Frog's legs!
But yeah, that's basically Big's contribution, as well as my headcanon in the mix. And man, I'd like to be just as happy as Sonic is getting a dirty tire instead of an actual fish. But before I get into the actual Eggman logs, there's still some more of the new stuff I want to talk about first. So back to the gameplay, right? So Sonic kicks ass. Again, and literally. And the crazy thing is, we all know that he can. Yeah, sure, most of the main title games outside of Sonic Battle hasn't had base Sonics showcasing the fact that this man got hands. But I guess people just think, Hedgehog spin, robots go boom. Boom Sonic, even though I have yet to fully play that game, and as annoying as it probably is, it at least knew he wasn't just about pushing a single button and mowing down enemies blindly. But as combat goes in this game, I still feel a lot of the zigzagging moves are a bit much. I mean, dodging where he flings his body to safety just to somehow get launched into the air still doesn't make sense to me, but it could. Now on my first playthrough, I leveled attack and defense up to the max. I recommend not even doing that, as well as the ring count. As far as leveling up goes, just do speed. I see this as a bigger flaw than this Elder Coco taking ages to finally level up speed and rings. But as I said before, it's still just a start. No enemy nor boss is going to give you as much trouble as the game would want you to believe. And even if there was one like the Shark mini boss, well, that's where the freedom of this game kicks in, because it's optional and there are alternatives, and even if all alternatives are used up, you still have that Starfall slot machine to respawn defeated enemies like a Breath of the Wild Blood Moon. But continuing on with Sonic's movesets, I think they're pretty faithful to what he's capable of doing, but they just need a balance animation wise, which is pretty good to say. If the moves had better visuals when executed, then yeah, it could work better more visually. But going from punching and kicking and bam, now he's in the air dropping down. Can you see how that looks janky? But at least you can actually spin jump on enemies and manage to do damage and keep booping them on the head like the classic days. But since we're on the topic of fighting foes, the actual enemies themselves, the Guardians and Titans are all cybernetic entities you will encounter, but mostly Guardians and the small fries. Though by the end of the game, you would have defeated more of the humanoid-like ones compared to the spinning wheels, the camera-stealing jellyfish, the bird sniper, and lastly, those goddamn wolves. Jesus, I hated those. And yeah, it's just parry this, parry that. But man, if you need an example of having players' freedom ruined, just run around Aronis Island and you will at least get stopped once, whether you were trying to go to them or whether you were just running, roaming around, and then bam, you just stop all of a sudden, and then you just look at Sonic looking just as confused as you and getting blindsided. Okay, ran over. Oh yeah, and the balls. Classic Sega. That feels straight out the 90s. As for the mini-boss Guardians though, all of their designs and how they work are pretty good. The automotive and rail grindy ones could have used a better or less time-consuming manner of going about fighting them, or I should really be saying getting to the point in which you can actually fight them and damage them. The first enemy that you will encounter is Ninja. As mentioned way earlier in the video, is that thick-hip Ninja. I really wish there was more of a challenge for it. And I know that is one out of the two enemies that has multiple variations of its forms that's even more difficult, but I don't know. I just feel like there should have been more of a first-time challenge for when you get your first-time encounter. But alas, for the most part, they just serve as tutorials for you as well as reminders for later encounters. The second tutorial-esque boss is Tower, and is a means to solidify to characters that, hey, if you want to unlock cyberspace, you're gonna have to defeat a few of these big named enemies. But yes, the giant dildo boss, not much work and only has its projectiles to worry about, and even its spiked ring that constantly goes up and down. Jesus, man, these designers aren't helping with the subtlety here. This boss too has multiple iterations that are harder than this first one. But to move on, the next boss is Ashura, a tower behemoth that made a lot of people go ooh and ah, until IGN showed off some gameplay on how easy it was to actually beat it, and it's sadly just a one-off fight consisting of going up using hoops and down 3 times, or if you're skilled enough, you can manage to damage its weak spot, wait for its whole animation of exploding, dodge, double jump, and hopefully be able to air dash to its next spot without touching the ground. Did I mention this game has freedom in it? Because that felt freeing. That always feels freeing to do. No, but seriously, doing that just feels rewarding as hell versus the vanilla going through the blue hoops method. And when you have all your moves unlocked to make quick work of it, yeah, definitely gives you that Sonic X feeling to it. Now, I have a question for you. Are you a kid or a squid? Yeah, I hate myself for that. Squid was an enemy that I remember everyone speculating the hell out of because of a Japanese advertisement that was probably 5 or 15 seconds, somewhere around that time frame. People wonder its ties to the stories. People were traumatized by how on rails it was. Then time passed, demos were played and showcased, and it just made people lose interest for it because it was just another optional mini boss, and really that's it. The only challenge that Squid has is the lack of perspective. Due to the nature of its linear run to the finish while only being able to slide left and right across 3 paths, due to the nature of its linear run to the 3 path lines you can select to run forward through, it strips away your camera control, so at times if Squid shoots you, you might get blindsided, but it's pretty much a fight to avoid solely because of the fact that you have to go through that whole entire lengthy segment. Now moving to the sand lands, and speaking of camera restrictive enemies, the jellyfish. You run towards it or in its vicinity and it takes up all of your attention, and it's just homing attack the non-lethal points just to have at it. And yes, I know it's not a mini boss, but just needed that to connect the next sea-like enemy being Shark. I feel like there could have been more than just a quick time event with this one. I don't know. There's enemies that throw you in the air, lock you in the arena, maybe Shark could have dragged you into a sand cavern of sorts, and considering this area it reintroduced being able to go underwater in 3D without instantly dying, which, need I remind you all, we haven't had that since Adventure 2 and for Sonic Adventure 1. And no, colors does not count. Those were 2D segments, just like 95% of that game. Shark was cool, but could be tedious if you lack the moves or attack powers, and will have to deal with the same QTE segment just to eventually get to the point that you can attack it again. Sumo is just that, a sumo robot, and I like that arcadey feeling it was to fight against it. Sonic with a WWE crossover maybe? Oh wait, no, we did have Sonic the Fighter, so I guess that could count. Yeah, it was great to just fling Sonic, slingshotting him towards the enemy to weaken it with its own electricity barrier just to leave it vulnerable to attacks. But for the most part, I did have my time enjoying this fight. Felt really good, even though most of the other enemies aren't as grounded as this one. Pretty fun. Now for another bothersome boss named Strider. This boss, just like Squid, is just another boss you go with the flow with, consisting of grinding rails as you light it up while dodging its electric defenses. Sometimes the legs screw your vision up and sometimes you get lucky. Unlike Squid, it's not so straightforward, and having to dodge electric balls as a means for difficulty makes it more of an annoyance, but after dealing with the literal grind, you get the open window to attacking, and just like that, you're as good as done. Now for Tank. I found this boss fight ironic when you think about it. For a tank, you'd usually think of a grounded military vehicle, but instead, this thing just yeets you up into the sky, and I will be honest, it confused me the first few times of going about it, and because the game doesn't hold your hand as much as past games, so when I figured it out for myself what it was I needed to do and when and where to attack felt truly good for a Sonic game. It genuinely felt good. Small details aside, that was really good. It didn't hold my hand, doesn't give you a tutorial, it just flings you there. If you die, you died. But it still remains a boss I'd sadly rather avoid because of that, and it's mainly because it's just another time consuming boss to me. Definitely not salty because of the fact that I died probably 5 or more times before I finally understood what it was that I needed to do. Now for Chaos, and for yet again another time-consuming boss, and not just for defeating it, but if you want to get to the one of the cyberspace levels, you would have to either defeat it or wait for it to slowly trek towards a cliff and hope you have enough time to enter said awaited level, Fortress. Now, I can actually say, since at this point in the game I had gotten accustomed to the floating rails, it was like a mixture of Squid and Strider, but more fun somehow. And the only downside I can honestly say about this boss is the fact that for all of what you do to get to its weak spot and how big it is, and the fact that it's flying, only a small attack area, that's a one and done, it would have been more cool if it had something just a little more flashy, just to compensate for its automatic boss. And frankly, a lot of other bosses that were automated could have done this similar kind of vibe, especially the time consuming ones, just to have it be more engaging to the player at least. Spider, the one enemy I actually missed on my second playthrough and forgot was even in the game, or maybe I just tried my best to avoid it. It's another time-consuming boss that'll be yeeing you into the sky, and you gotta go about free-falling, dodging spiky balls, going through loops to ultimately strike it down, and then send a barrage of attacks its way, and hopefully not have to go through that all over again. Not gonna lie, the trailer for the game, it showed Spider, but Sonic makes quicker work of it than you do in the actual game, so we need that kind of power that he had for his max level. But I guess nerfing Sonic was a safe call, and better than just boosting as we've had for a decade. So, you know, I guess it's pretty flavorful. Now for the last area, Orionoris, or however way you say that name. Caterpillar, which I feel like could have been called Beetle given its appearance. It's just another tame version of Strider, and you just gotta collect its orbs, then you can actually get off the rails and actually fight and defeat it. Hell, you can even flip it over on its back like a helpless turtle, so I'm pretty sure that's gotta be a callback to Heroes in some sort of way or fashion, or just, you know, basic logic. Now the last mini boss that you'll ever come across is Ghost. This one was the most unique out of all the bosses. Maybe not Ashura, because they kind of have that same type of fighting its 3 different weak spots for attacking and something like that sort. When I first did it, so I looped its weak spot and I thought, you know, hey, I'm done. But no, I wasn't. For this boss, he actually continues to steal your ring, so hearing that ring counter still going down, I was like, okay, then you have to find another weak spot, which will have like a few platforms here and there for you, so then it's like you can go about it and while trying to dodge its attack because it's trying to prevent you from actually defeating it, and I found that to be really cool. This is really the most engaging mini boss in the game, which I feel like all the other ones really should have been more of. Ashura, being on its same kind of level, still wasn't just as good as it was, because I mean all it really does is just slap its hand down, and then that's really what its downfall was, giving you indirect help by trying to crush you. So yeah, but for the 2 repeating bosses, Ninja and Tower, the other enhanced versions are Shinobi and Excavator for Chaos, and Kunoichi, Master Ninja, Red Pillar, and Silverhammer for Orionis. Really, they're just all the same, but with a few differences. But for the towers, they just get more spiky and shoot freaking laser cannons, and as for ninjas, they end up using shadow clones and will at times disappear to hit you with a few cheap shots. That's it for the Guardians and mini bosses. They all have their varied designs, and the naming for them is a bit lackluster, besides the ones that have their reiterations. But what they are the origin of and where they come from in the story, it makes a lot of sense given they are indeed Guardians for the Ancients. Now to move on, and how could I take so long for the man of the hour? That's right,
Baldy nose hair!
is back, until he's not. The game opening up to his schemes. To be honest, at first I thought the AI sage that accompanies him was part of the Ancient's tech from Cyberspace, until I rewatched his opening and I heard Sage's voice. But as far as the backstory goes in game, there's never really much explained on how he decided to make such a program. But after finally going through the Eggman logs, he seems pretty happy about it. The logs themselves, I didn't look into it until the making of this script, since though I had them unlocked, I just shrugged them off because, you know, they're optional. But now finally hearing them, they too have a multitude of references to past games, and they at least don't feel as forced. Even some like the dreaded days of the scripted writing. It was good to finally see a canon reasoning for why they went from the change of Dr. Robotnik to Dr. Eggman. I always wondered that as a kid, considering the fact that in Adventure he calls himself Dr. Robotnik, and then Sonic proceeds to call him Eggman and Egghead, and then it's just like, okay, for the next games is Dr. Eggman. And then with the introduction of Gerald Robotnik in Sonic Adventure 2, it's like, okay, what was up with that? I mean, you can kind of come to conclusions, but it's like we've had an older version of Eggman before, or Robotnik with the American version of Sonic and all that stuff. You can see how it can kind of be confusing for a kid. So hey, finally glad we got that confirmed. But I'd be doing this a big disservice if I didn't tie in Sage into my Eggman talk. And even the more entries you get in similar to Knuckles' self-reflection fashion, Eggman thinks back on his cousin Maria, and even sounding a bit jealous and misunderstood like you'd expect a kid to try to stand out for attention would be. Really shows how his character has been developed. Just to have it hit home that he really doesn't have a family for himself, and comes to the point of having a fatherly affection towards Sage itself. No, herself. Yeah. Lines like that really feels good. This side of Eggman was probably the most human we've seen him as a human being for a long time, that has even more deep untold backstory to be told, which I really hope we get more of that. Though there was this one line that made me go, wait, what? Because of I basically had to listen to it clear for like context. But yeah, whatever, I'm pretty sure it's nothing. But as for the rest of the memos go, when he mentions past events and the rest of the characters, and besides cursing Sonic's name, it really felt like, if anything, he's making a blunt comparison of the characters you had before the game and what we're ultimately gonna get after this game, like for Amy being clingy, but in the end she's not clingy, him realizing Knuckles is away from the Master Emerald, and his arc being to live a little away from that protector role, and seeing Tails as worshiping Sonic to being dependent on him from the story to give his long-awaited independence back. Obviously, Eggman being stuck in cyberspace, he wouldn't know of these moments, and for those characters having a changing moment like that, it's also ironically useful information that he could use. But because Sage as an AI would see it as useless information to getting Eggman out, all she's left with is emotions, given from her other objective to spy on Sonic along the way. Now for Sage herself, whatever. Her gaining a sense of humanity is very much up to what we could rub ideas about until either the DLC fleshes it out or Sega years down the line makes a weird statement about it. I hope they don't do that. Remember the moon? I think considering how hostile Sage is compared to how helpful she is in the end, especially the end, could be a mixture of conflictions. For when we first see Sage, she's just a device Eggman planted on a cyberspace pillar, but the next time we see her is with an actual body floating around. Even on my second playthrough, I kept thinking and asking myself, why not just tell Sonic what's going on? And maybe a lot of others felt the same. The consistent drip feeding and the mini cutscenes that are optional but fill in a few blanks, but just never that talk of teaming up. And it would always come across as, oh, you're not gonna make it, and then he's like, okay, whatever, leave me alone or tell me something useful. Yeah, stuff like that. And at first, and on my second playthrough, it felt a little bit like padding, but when you consider who made her, regardless of the circumstances, that was never part of the programming until later in the game. But for Sage's actual conflictions, so if I had to have one last headcanon, I would think with all the intel she's gathered from cyberspace and with the ability to summon but not control the same Titan, she's had enough of her share being in the many memories of the ancient cyberspace memories, learning their ways of life, backstory, and more importantly, their demise. So for me, looking back at this trailer of Sonic saving a Coco, which are indeed the remnants of the ancients, where Sonic will help gather and protect them, Sage's logical choice would be to end them from their static state of ignorant bliss. See, in the game, the ancients had everything taken away from them, and from the looks of the islands, they barely had much time to build their defenses from the same entity that drove them away from their planet. So the logical thing would be to put them out of their unknown misery, but Clearly, the path of Sonic was the better route taken by giving them all the closure they need, but that too would add on to Sage's confliction, questioning for insight, questioning for reason, questioning to learn, but overall questioning that she thought she'd never have to ask and wasn't even part of her initial programming. You see, for living beings, we've learned through mistakes, many trials and errors, questions, and sought out to finding those answers. Sage is just an AI, a fresh new face to the world, and similar colors to a certain particular hedgehog that had that same issue. As the game progresses and with Sonic going in and out of cyberspace to save his friends, their freedom become his corruption, but yet even Eggman himself can come to complimenting his will. But for Sage, it is her first encounter with him. But even for her, having similar adventures in and out while surveying Sonic through cyberspace, unlocking memories of those that gave their lives to protect what remains left of their people even within the small vessels of Coco's, I guess even an AI can be given life. I mean, she was created by a true genius after all. But with this life and the spine, the red corrupted glow she had would ultimately turn blue, and the black cloak turning white for those feelings learned from Sonic and Co. With the fears of the past civilizations, the emotions that have been gained from that fear, but more importantly, fear those emotions that wanted to create a new function to protect her father. Remember how people say Sonic games don't need realism, don't need to be deep, and should just stay cartoony? That's a bunch of baloney. Sage's characterization as a new character, especially one being very familiar in color and confusion, it's like very deep in a way that anybody could feel the same way. And stories like these are really good, and being told within a franchise that has yet to have been so serious for a whole decade, it really feels good to see again. And it really has lessons, deeper meanings within it that if picked apart, it's like, who knows, people can learn something new regardless on how young they are or how old they can be. It really makes me remember that video games are art. But besides going into that philosophical thing, the ancients aren't too much to mention. I love that they have the chaos design minus the whole brain he had. Also wished with all the references and usage of machines, maybe Emerald could have made an appearance, a cameo of some sorts, given how old he actually is. But overall, the ancients have more of a backstory of fleeing to survive only to fight and lose against their inevitable threat. Pretty sad, because like I said before, it doesn't look like they had enough time to build up their defenses, and with their desperate move to preserve themselves in cyberspace and Coco's, that really is just a dark reality. It's like some Gurren Lagann anti-spiral lore kind of vibe to it, preserving oneself inside of a habitat that they could just live blissfully in, but ignorant at what truly happened. This game is so damn deep. Now I think it's been very, very long enough. And speaking of Gurren Lagann likeness, and to end this long 31 long page scripted video, there's the matter of the glowing beacon, the ray of hope, the light in the darkness, Supersonic. This has been the most fun of Supersonic boss fighting gameplay in any Sonic game in years, and the comparison is literally none. Not one game can come to this kind of power, and as great as games in the past have done, making each time a unique experience, none hit harder than this has done. The gameplay, the stakes, and ooh, sweet baby Jesus, the vocal music tracks. God damn the music, oh my lord.
This is some good shit.
Every fight has its own theme, and Undefeatable being the first song for the first boss for the first time in years, for the return of Supersonic, for the first time with all the action and for all the style. This was greatness. So for the first three bosses, there's a climb you gotta go through in order to actually fight. But man, when it's time to throw down, it's time for a beat down. So I looked at the lyrics for these vocals, and man, it doesn't feel like a boss theme at all, and more of a tag team hero theme duet featuring Sonic and the friend that resides on the island you're on. Though Undefeatable is more being on the Sonic side, not much the Amy side, but the means to facing one's fear as the Coco she and Sonic helped had a sense of worry and family reuniting, but it does still remains to have that same Sonic showing off, feeling cocky nature he's known for for while also having enough perseverance vibing to it, the enemy underestimates you, and it doesn't matter what happens because he'll never give up the fight. Even if he's thrown to the worst ordeals, his will is undefeatable, and the way the emeralds brightly rotate around him are like the aligning stars, and what you get is just super. But ending it feels like a welcome to a different kind of new frontier. The series has entered with a lot of glory and uncovering a new story along the way. The first fight definitely slaps and hits off a good routine of what we should be getting forward on. As mentioned, talking about Ares Island, a lot of flying enemies, and even with Sage testing Sonic's ability out of the first sight with the emerald spreading across the new sandlands after being shot down, his energy and drive is still enough to avoid the attacks of Wyvern and breaks through it all. So when it finally comes to the time to fight and going up a tower to face the threat, yeah, the automatic segment was a bit slow, but the reward for another chance to shine. The only downside is the actual boss fight does consist of automatic flying, but to see Sonic flying alongside that enemy that towers over him in size and the seriousness of the lyrics with the chanting in the background as a means to simulate a crowd, it definitely feels like an anthem for Knuckles and the mini army of Cocos he managed to inspire along the way with Sonic. The spirit of the song and the increased awesomeness when it came to the boss swinging counters and the boss stopping finishers. And lastly, that build up for the final defeat using the enemy's own projectiles against it. Ah man, it was just so poetic. It doesn't make sense how it started to have like some sort of inflation, but I don't care. It didn't matter. It was just awesome, but not better than Super Knuckles. But when it came down to the shenanigans on Chaos Island of the Knight's 2D auto-scrolling pre-fight mess, it made every moment to have that rematch even more satisfying, and the title of Finding Your Flame flies high for what Tails has needed for the past decade, a character that won't back down and through everything makes sure everyone knows his name, Miles Tails Prower, to provide that power to stand on his own once again. But for now, it's Supersonic time to show off what the power of Chaos could be used for when wielded by good, surfing on the enemy's weapon to lead a strike while desperately shooting missiles as a means of defense to no end, just to fail, and having an actual robot boss have a temper tantrum, shooting lasers. Hell, even I was surprised to find out Sonic can use some sort of chaos chains and drop the whole chaos spear. Oh my god, then yeeting the enemy in the air with the axe kick finisher. Oh my god, Jesus Christ, and finish it off by wielding that same enemy's giant fucking sword to finish it in a split. Oh, this game had no fucking right to hit this hard with the boss fight. It was just great, just amazing. But in the end, now, the one that stands as the many outcries for the many fans within the classic series for 30 plus years and counting, the change that starts with this game, the song that opens the heart and eyes for those playing the game, the story that changed AI itself, enemies to allies, the real superpower of teamwork, a new view through the lens of someone once unknown to you makes it clear that he is definitely here. Supreme as a boss is okay compared to the others, but considering everything Sonic has done in his days and nights of getting his friends' freedom back, just to ultimately lose his, just for his same friends to risk everything onto him to remain that same beacon, that ray of hope for all against a bigger threat they themselves know without a doubt that he'd be able to stop, especially having them along with him in spirit in some type of way, shape, or fashion. And with the new alliance of old foes into allies, it's more than enough to inspire anyone for a change. This is not just one scheme, but a unity for all those that play, and this scheme by a greater evil. But the message ends clear, as each trial was a meaningless effort against good, and that was what made these moments beautiful to play through, making that rocky monthly wait more than worth it. But regardless of all that, this was proof that Sonic was here. I know I went on a bit of a tangent in those last two songs, but looking back on the series as a whole and the many deep messaging the series has had for what they've told directly and indirectly, it honestly makes the child me reignite one of many reasons why I will love and be grateful of video games, and the sheer appreciation to those that put genuine love and effort for their work. And yeah, dealing with the true final boss is a bit bland, but for that non-musical score, it felt like a really good conclusion to the game that is Sonic Frontiers. I honestly don't know what I'm gonna name this video, but I just wanted to make a long-winded script on how I feel about this long-awaited game. I feel as though if we got this kind of safe game in 2017, then Forces after, but with this playstyle and Forces style of urban background, I'd say it would have been more than enjoyable, especially if they made classic Sonic and a feeling like gameplay, maybe something similar to Adventure, considering, you know, they do feel kind of short and small in stature, and have the avatar be just as unique with the use of Wispins and maybe be like a Spider-Man of some sorts. I see the potential Frontiers has, and I think after playing this, we can breathe a relief that not only is Sonic back, but slowly and steadily all of his friends are coming back, but more independent than ever. As for Eggman, he's had a change here, and it's clear as day to see, but with the post-credit scene, I hope it doesn't hurt future games the way people want to believe Shadow coming back did. I'd like to see unity of these characters, like Heroes had it, with a big bad that makes everyone band together. Obviously not all the time, but for the time that Sage has learned to be more human-like, it'd be a shame to just have her forget everything, or it's back to the Eggman the bad man as she's there to just watch him do his villainy and blow up the planet again, especially with his own memo logs that fleshed out how he feels on a deeper level. Other than that, I've enjoyed my time playing this game. Global playtest be damned. For a start to something new, this game and all the future DLC may just be an 8 out of 10 for me, and Sega and Sonic team have something good here, and I hope it continues to improve for the next decade if this is what they're going for. And then we eventually get that long-awaited Sonic Adventure 3, or hopefully just the Sonic Adventure remake, and then Sonic Adventure 2 remake. I mean, we're already remaking 5.5-year-old games, so why not? Hey, so it's been a while since my last video, but obviously this took a lot longer, and I wanted to give my thoughts, and I was a little new on the formatting on how I go about things, but kind of didn't really know how to go about it, if I'm going to be completely honest, but I guess it all worked out in the end. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and share your thoughts on how the game and your experience with it and your experience with the series was like. Also, like a small did you know that the game's islands were Greek inspired. I didn't really notice it until making the video, which is ironic since I beat like God of War Ragnarok last year right after Frontier release, and I think they fit. Kronos and Amy's timeless love, Ares the God of War, and the General Knuckles Chaos, well, that's kind of weird. They don't really say too much, but considering Tails' chaotic characterization over the years feels right on the money, and Rhea being like the daughter of Earth and Sky gods makes sense considering Sonic has to go up and down the satellite temple, whatever the hell they're called, and Arianos being the literal sky and the end being a spherical moon is pretty symbolic, and since it's also a fake moon and the Greeks thought that the sky was a solid dome with decorated stars, you know, I think Sonic Frontiers can be that game we can use when people say Sonic games don't need to be serious and can just be cartoony, you know? I also want to say, sorry if my voice kind of feels and sounds inconsistent in this video. I mean, if you look at the community post I made, like, that's a lot of goddamn words and a lot of characters. But I also added some more to it just to make some fine touches, so my voice is kind of like going in and out, and yeah. Water ain't even helping it, so sorry if that kind of bothered you a little bit, but other than that, I do hope you enjoyed the video. But yeah, I've enjoyed my fill, and I'm pretty excited for what's to come. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Wherever you may reside, hopefully you're doing good, your friends, families, and loved ones in your life alike. Happy New Year's, first and foremost, and till next time, see you later.